What's up, Mission? How we doing? Good morning, good morning. What's up? My name is Mike Hickerson. I'm honored to be the lead pastor of Mission Church. Man, I love this church. If you're hanging online or in the lobby or in the room or on the patio, braving the elements on the patio, welcome, welcome, welcome. We exist as a church to help people find and follow Jesus. That's what we go after. I know there's tons of options that you have on your weekends and plans and stuff, so honored that Mission's a part of your weekend. We just want to be able to be a kind of church that helps people find Jesus. We're not perfect people in the room. In fact, one of our values is that there are no perfect people. So if you walk in expecting perfection, or the coffee's a little too hot, or the coffee's a little too cold, or the coffee's a little too sweet, or a little too bitter, or the donut holes just aren't hitting just right, I'm so sorry, but there are no perfect people. This is not a perfect church. If you're expecting perfection, what is wrong with you? So it's helpful every time that we gather together to look at the person next to you, and I hope that you just met them and were nice, or you know them and you've been nice and not fighting, and just turn to them and be like, hey, I just want you to know something. I believe him, and just say like, because of what he said, I just want you to know you're not perfect. So just go ahead and tell them. It'll be great. Just remind them that you're God's gift to them, to remind them of how imperfect they are. It's such a great gift that you've given them. They're going to get mad. It's kind of a joke. It's kind of a joke. Don't do this later for real. We talk about this. This is not a great idea to do later when we remind ourselves when we're actually mad at each other or frustrated at each other, of how imperfect we are. But it's great to do as we're the church together, not the building, but the people together, to remind ourselves that there are no perfect people, but there's a perfect God who rescues and saves. That's the only thing we got going for us. Not that we're awesome, but that God is, and he moved towards us in our mess to bring us back to him. And because of that, that means that anyone is welcome, that change is possible, that God just didn't leave us stuck here in the mess and say, well, I hope you get out of it yourself. And he's like up there somehow like an absentee landlord, like looking down at all the pain that we're in. But he actually gave us everything that we need to live the life that he's called us to, and we can be changed and transformed from the inside out. And that means that there's hope for every single one of us. No matter where you are or what you've done, there's hope for everyone, because God is who he says he is and will do all that he's promised to do. That's what we cling to here. That's what we go after here as imperfect people that are being transformed and being changed and on the journey to who God has created us to be. We want to be the kind of people that not only experience hope, but extend hope, because God is great and he rescues and saves. And so that's what we go after together. We've been in this series called Rings of Fire, and like, we're not that creative. We stole it. I don't remember who we stole it from, but you'll figure it out. And we were like, okay, let's talk about some of the fire stories of the Bible and like what God would maybe want to teach us through some of the fire stories of the Bible. And the first one we talked about, it was Elijah, where like Elijah calls down fire. You're like, I didn't know that was in the Bible. That's good. That was good. That's good stuff. So you may want to go back and look at that, where like, Elijah's going like, how long will you waver? And like fire comes down. It's a cool story. So go watch that. There's been some fire stories. And last week, Jen on Mother's Day taught us through how there's beauty from ashes. And then Jesus was like, no, that's fulfilled in your presence for me. I'm the one who restores broken hearts. Like, we talked about what Jesus does in the lives of people. It was an awesome message. Go back and listen to that. Today we're going to talk about the charcoal fire, or the coals of the New Testament that Peter hangs around, and some lessons we can learn from that. And then next week we're going to talk about smoke. Not that kind. We'll talk about that later. But it's gonna be great, and it's gonna be an awesome message that we can go. And that's got me thinking. So part of what Peter's story is known for is like massive amounts of failure. And you may not know that. That's all right. You don't have to have all the Bible knowledge to walk in. That's all right. That's why we're on the journey together. But Peter's kind of known to having massive amounts of failure. He's known for some good things too, but he's also known like, get behind me, Satan. It's like, you don't want Jesus to call you Satan. That's not the way you want to go about it. And so it got me thinking of like, what are some of the most like recent, like massive failures in our society? And I was going to have you talk to each other. Then I thought that may be offensive, because you're like, my husband. It's a massive failure. I'm sorry about that. But then so I was like, well, maybe we'll just talk, maybe some of the ones that I was thinking of so that we don't offend anybody. That's where we'll go. So the first one I thought of was the Titanic. Like massive failure, 1912, unsinkable ship, maritime disaster, and there was an iceberg dead ahead, and like 1,500 lives, and Leonardo DiCaprio died all in one moment. So it was massive failure. And Chernobyl in 1986, nuclear power plant in Ukraine, massive catastrophic meltdown during a safety test, numerous deaths, long-term health and environmental consequences. Do we know what we're talking about? Chernobyl? You got that? All right. Oh, sorry. 1986, kids, was a decade. Never mind. Just Google it. It'll be fine. We didn't even have Google then, but you can Google it now. Enron. If you work for Enron, I love you. You're all right. You're okay. A prominent energy company in the United States collapsed in 2001 due to massive accounting fraud and corporate misconduct, among a bunch of other things. There's documentaries all over the world about Enron. The Hindenburg, 1937, German airship caught fire while attempting to dock in New Jersey. 36 people died, and it ended all the helium experiments of airships. It was that's probably needed to happen. Let's just be honest on that. Apollo 1. 1967, a fire breaks out in Apollo 1 command module during a ground test, and 3 American astronauts die, and it changes NASA forever on how they do things. And then maybe one of the biggest failures in social history, 1985, New Coke. Awful. Coke had this great thing. They were battling Pepsi, and they bring New Coke out, and it is stank nasty. It's awful. It almost bankrupts the whole company. It was terrible. They had to do a whole. Anybody ever try New Coke? If you could find it, please don't. It's awful. Let it go. Just let it go. But it's a bad failure. And it kind of got me thinking of we're a kind of people that love failure, watching other people fail or learning about other people's failure. And we love casting stones at other people, how idiots they are. Or we like driving by the wreck and be like, what idiot did that? We love cheering on, not in a good way, other people's failure, because we would never fail. We would never do that. We would never be the kind of people that would lead us that way or lead a family into ruin or kind of make those decisions. If we were given what all those people were given, we would never do that. So I thought we may take a test today, just a failure test in the room. Don't raise your hand or don't elbow or don't yell, because this will be awkward, so don't do that. But if you've ever flunked a class or bombed a test, got cut from a team, relapsed into addiction, messed up an audition, rejected for a date, didn't get the job, got fired for a minor thing, a major mishap, or a huge mistake, flipped out on a 3-year-old or a 13-year-old as a parent, if you've ever experienced a moral, social, athletic, academic, relational, financial, marital, or vocational failure of any kind, would you just raise your hand? What is wrong? What a bunch of losers. What is wrong with you? What is wrong with you? And if you didn't raise your hand, God love you, but you lie. So the Bible, you need to know there are no perfect people, but the Bible is full of hope for failures like you and I. And you need to know in this moment, I don't know your story, or maybe I don't know your biggest failure. I don't know everything about you, but I do know about this, is that God is not done with you. He's not bailed on you. He's not forgotten you. He's not embarrassed of you. And he's not walking away from you because of your failure. He moves towards the messes. And one of the stories that we're going to walk through today is one of the heroes of the Bible, one of the heroes of the New Testament, one of Jesus' best friends is royally known for screwing up. And his failure is not final for him. And so this guy named Peter, and so when I think about Peter, it's the way I didn't grow up in church, so I got to get an image in my mind. He's this strong, big, rough, pickup truck kind of guy, impulsive, strong-willed, probably has way too much chewing tobacco in his mouth. You know, he's spitting out. He's got country music on the radio. He's opinionated and feisty. He's got a gun rack, a good heart, rock. He's like this Grizzly Adams kind of guy, or I don't know if you've seen this meme. He's like this guy. In my mind, I'm like, yeah. I mean, he may be a little bit darker complected, but it's like that guy. That's like, in my mind, that's what Peter is like, right? That's who he is. He's this rock. And he's got 2 fire stories in the New Testament. It's actually 2 times the only time that charcoal fire is used in the New Testament. And it involves Peter's life. And so one of them is a massive failure, and one of them is a restoration. And so what we're going to do today, we're going to walk through both stories. There's going to be a lot of text on here, but it's the story of Peter's massive failure and what Jesus does with failures like us. So the first one is in John 18. So let me set the context. This is like, you may not grow up in church, that's all right. So this is after the Last Supper. This is right before Jesus is getting ready to be killed. He had just spent a meal with his best friends. It's why even communion exists. It had just happened at this meal. And he takes his best friends into this garden and they're praying. And Jesus knows what's coming. So he's praying for people not to fall into temptation. He's praying for unity. He's praying for all this stuff. And then all of a sudden, he sees this trail of torches coming to him, and Jesus knows it's time. So that we drop into John 18, and that's what's going on. So when Jesus had finished praying, Jesus left with his disciples and crossed into the Kidron Valley. And so on the other side, there was this garden. This is what we're talking about. He has kind of finished praying in the upper room. He's moving to this garden and across the Kidron Valley, and he and his disciples went into it. Now Judas, who was one of his boys, one of the inner circle, had already left the meal to go betray Jesus. So now Judas, who betrayed him, knew the place because Jesus had often met there with his disciples. Judas knew right where to find Jesus if he's going to be praying after a meal. So Judas came to the garden, guiding a detachment of soldiers all the way down, and some officials and the chief priests and the Pharisees. So that would be like the Jewish, OG bad boys. They were the ones that were going to come, handle everything, right? They were carrying torches and lanterns and weapons. Jesus, knowing all that was going to happen to him, went out and said, "Who is it that you want?" "Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "I am he," Jesus said. And Judas the traitor was there standing with them. And when Jesus said, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. I love that. It's like, oh, that's you. We brought hundreds of people to arrest a rabbi. And whenever you say who you are, and that's like a Jewish name for God right there, so it was it wigs everyone out. And I love that they fall to the ground. They got all these weapons and he's just a dude right here. And they're scared to death because they actually know who he is. Again, he asked them, "Who is it that you want?" "Jesus of Nazareth," they said. "I told you, I am he. If you were looking for me, then let these men go. This happened so that the words had spoken would be fulfilled. I have not lost one of these that you have given me." Then Simon Peter, our boy, Grizzly Adams, who had a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. Now I love this. Because Peter, early in the Last Supper, Jesus tells, "Oh, Peter, you're going to deny me 3 times tonight, dude, before the rooster crows." And Peter's like, "I won't deny you. I'm down. I'm ready. You go, I go. I may not always back your play, but if you make the play, I'm backing your play." And he meant it. He's ready to go. He's got a little fishing knife. So it's not like a sword. It's like a fishing knife because he's a fisherman. So he's like, game on. We got 100 people with swords and torches and weapons. Let's go. I'm he meant it. But then I also love Peter because he went after Malchus, who is the priest servant who wouldn't have had a weapon. When we get up there, we'll talk about it, bro. But again, you're about it. But you also cut off the servant's ear that has no weapon. And Jesus is like, whoa. And actually in another gospel, one of Matthew, and I think it's Matthew, that Jesus actually goes, whoa, Peter, we don't fight like that. And he grabs the servant's ear and snaps it back on. For real. And then goes, okay, where were we? And everybody's like, oh, we're in trouble, right? But he says to Peter in that moment with Malchus, Jesus commanded Peter, "Put your sword away. That's not how we fight here. Should I not drink from the cup that the Father has given me?" Meaning this is what I'm here for. This is what I'm moving for. Don't stop what God already has in motion. Then the detachment of soldiers with its commander and the Jewish officials arrested Jesus. They bound him and brought him first to Annas, who was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest that year. Caiaphas was the one who advised the Jewish leaders that it would be good if one man died for the people. Simon Peter and another disciple. So John wrote this, and he refers to himself as the disciple Jesus loves. So he rarely refers to himself by name, which sometimes is funny. It kind of gets funny here. I'll try not to make too many jokes. So Simon Peter and the other disciple were following Jesus. Because this disciple was known to the high priest, he went with Jesus into the high priest's courtyard, but Peter didn't get the red carpet invites, had to wait outside the door. The other disciple, who shall go nameless, because he's humble, was known to the high priest, came back and spoke to the servant girl on duty there and brought Peter in. And she goes, "I know you. You aren't one of this man's disciples too, are you?" She asked Peter. He replied, "I am not." Denial number one. And then we get to the charcoal fire. It was cold, and the servants and officials stood around the fire because Jesus is up with the high priest getting punched, beaten, mocked, scorned, ridiculed, and saying nothing. That's what's happened up in the building. We got John and Peter hanging out by the fire. While the trial is going up there that Jesus can't win, there's a trial going on right here in the courtyard that Peter is failing miserably. It was cold, and the servants and officials stood around a charcoal fire to keep them, that they made to keep him warm. Peter was also standing with them, warming himself. When Simon Peter was still standing there warming himself, so they asked him, you're one of his disciples too, aren't you? He denied it, saying, I'm not. Denial number two. One of the high priest's servants, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, challenged him. I'm pretty sure I know who cut my boy's ear off. I'm sorry, that wasn't in the Bible. Didn't I see you with him in the garden? Again, Peter denied it. And at that moment, a rooster began to crow. And in fact, Luke would say in that moment, there was eye contact made from what was going on with Jesus right there to that Jesus could see the fire right there. And there was eye contact made with Peter in that moment. And then in fact, in the third denial, it says in another, I think it's Matthew again, Peter says he started cursing. May I go to hell if I knew the man. I don't know the man. He's cursing everybody around him. I don't know the man. And he does that. He locks eyes with Jesus. Rooster crows just like Jesus said it was. And Peter is wrecked. Massive failure. He doesn't know what to do. He turns and looks at Jesus, and he runs. Peter is known for lots of great things, but most of us know Peter for his failure, for this fire moment right here. When Jesus, his boy, his friend, is experiencing the worst so far of his life, Peter denies him and runs. So then we fast forward. So we got Jesus going through a Jewish trial right here. And then what happens is he goes to a Roman trial over here with Pilate. That's some of our Easter story. When we talk about Good Friday, we've kind of caught up on some of that. So Peter runs out. Jesus is crucified. His disciples are scattered. Jesus is laid in a tomb. And all of a sudden, what we know about Sunday, of Easter Sunday, there's an empty tomb. And that's a good day. And all of a sudden, the lady, Mary, is at the tomb. And she runs to tell Peter and John. And they go check out the tomb. And so what happens is Peter has seen the empty tomb of his boy, but he hasn't seen Jesus yet. And the last time he saw Jesus is when he denied him and bailed and failed miserably. But we got another charcoal fire to get around in John 21. It's the second fire, the only other time in the Bible and the New Testament that the charcoal fire is used is around this story of Peter. It's in John 21, and it says this: after Jesus appeared again to his disciples. So Jesus is raised, and he appeared to his disciples by the Sea of Galilee, and it happened this way, John says. Simon Peter, Thomas, also known as Didymus, Nathanael from Cana of Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, the two other disciples were together. And Peter is like, man, I've failed. And so what he does is I'm going to go fishing. And if you know anybody that fishes, if they need to clear their head, what do? They go fish. Does it matter if they catch? Nope. They're just going casting. Because they just need to get out on the water. There's something about it. He knew, his life before Jesus was all about fishing. So his life, because of Jesus and his failure, he's like, I just ruined my life, so I'm just going to go back to the life I know. Woo, been there? When you feel like you failed God, and you just got to go back to the life you know, because it's the only thing you know before Jesus. So that's what he does. I'm going fishing. Simon Peter told them, and they said, we'll go with you. Ooh. Stop there just for a second. You got friends when you're going through it? Even when you're trying to get alone? Won't let you be alone? That's good boys right there. You're going fishing? That's funny, I'm going fishing. You're going through it? I'm with you. You failed? I'm not bailing. Come on. We're together. So they went out and got into the boat, but that night, they caught nothing. Fishermen for you. But I have a feeling what was going on that night in the boat was way more important than the fish that they were catching. You with me? Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize that it was Jesus, and he calls out to them, "Friends, haven't you any fish?" Fishermen love that question. Love it. Got anything? Catch anything? Does it look like we have anything? So are we just slaying them over here? No. Jerk. No, they answered. Sorry, I read that. Verse 6. Throw your net on the other side. Okay. Even things that they like more than, like, did you catch anything, is advice on how to catch things. Fishermen love that. So if you have any fishermen in your life, you should help them. They would love this. Throw your net on the right side of the boat and you will find some. And when they did, they were unable to haul the net in because of the large amount of fish. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved, that's John, who wrote the book of John, here we go, said to Peter, "It's the Lord." And as soon as Simon Peter heard him say it's the Lord, he wrapped his outer garment, because he was like fishing, so he had already got like down to his skivvies a little bit around him, for he had taken it off, and he jumped into the water. The other disciple, and then I hear John saying the responsible one, followed in the boat, towing the net full of fish. They were then not far from shore, about 100 yards, and when they landed, they saw a fire of burning coals there with fish on it and some bread. I love it, because Jesus is like, we got the charcoal fire of denial, and then we got the breakfast charcoal fire of Jesus going like, you hungry? You want to sit with me? You want to be with me? There's something powerful about a meal together, and you want some breakfast? Let's talk. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" Man, it's the first conversation that they had after Peter denied him in front of everyone when it mattered most. At Jesus' worst situation that he was in, Peter bailed. And he says, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And Jesus said, "Well, feed my lambs. I got stuff for you to do. You're not done." Again, Jesus said, "Simon, do you love me?" He answered, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Then take care of my sheep." The third time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Why do you, just curious, I know you're not Bible scholars, why would you think Jesus would ask him 3 times? You're geniuses. Yes, it makes so much sense, because he denied him 3 times. Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the 3rd time, "Do you love me?" He said, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." And Jesus said, "Feed my sheep." And then later on he says, "And I need you to remind yourself, I'm inviting you again to follow me." And I don't know where you are and what your most biggest failure that you're known for. And yes, we love to mock other people's failures. And we love to see all the idiot things that they've done that we would never do. But then when we think about our lives, man, we have royally messed up some things. So how does Jesus respond to failures and imperfect people like us and like his friend Peter? And what we can learn from that? And the 2 charcoal fires of the New Testament. The first thing is that my performance is not the basis of God's acceptance. That God specializes in messes. God's primary response to our rebellion, he has already sent Jesus into the mess to pay for our rebellion. His primary response to our rebellion and our failure is the grace that he sent his son, Jesus Christ. So my relationship with God is not based on my performance. Woo! That's good news for me. Second thing that I can learn from Peter's failure is that my failure is not final, and neither is yours. This isn't that bad people are kind of cleaned up and made good and pat on the back and be like, well, don't try it, don't do that again, and well, we can't really trust him anymore. No, this is dead people in their rebellion, in their sin, in their mess are made alive and new. And so our failures are not final. Some of us can't stand the moment that we're called to by God because we are so stuck in the moment that we failed in. God has stuff for you. Your failure is not final, and we can't lean into what God has for us because we are still stuck in the moment that we failed in. And God's like, I don't remember that anymore because I've forgiven it. Third thing that we can remember is that I need to own my failure. It's not like a little blunder. I need to be able to say, man, I did this. I was this. I need to be able to own it so that I can give it to Jesus so that I know what he's forgiving me for. Fourth, I need to stay in the group. When I'm at my worst, I need my people. And when I'm at my worst failure, the last thing I want is my people. Because I feel shame, I feel embarrassment, feel regret, feel hiding. I don't want anyone to know, but the best thing that we could do is stay with our people. But our everything in us wants to pull away from church, pull away from groups, pull away from family, pull away from relationships, pull away from meetings. That's what we want to do because the enemy of our soul loves it when he can get us isolated. Especially if he can cast guilt and our shame in our heads and then keep us isolated. We think we can't show our face after failure. And I've just been wondering, when did Jesus and the church lose its reputation of being the place you go when you fail? I would love for us to get back to that. Fifth, in my mess, what I can learn from Peter's failure is I got to find Jesus. As you're navigating through the failure and the mess of your life, keep looking for Jesus because he is not hard to find. He is there and present and active and trying to win you back to him. And the last thing, my mess, our mess, usually turns into our message. Because it's what God has rescued us from. And he will help us help other people find him if we will surrender to him. Wouldn't pretend to know your story. Or what your massive blow up, or if you feel like you got a failure card over your head, like everyone knows you as this thing. But I do know that your failure is not final. When you look at the charcoal fires of Peter's story in the New Testament, it reminds us of that. Why don't you pray with me? God, you are good, and you are great, and you rescue and save. You have taken the rebellion of our hearts. You have taken our biggest failures and paid for them so that we could be right with you. And you not only made us right with you, you also gave us purpose for our future. And you transform us from the inside out. And we need that. It's in Jesus' name we pray.